Welcome to another episode of the Pentecast podcast. My name is Andrew Bella, your host, and sad news today, folks. Very sad news. Ryan Sellers is under the weather. He is not dealing with COVID, thank the Lord, but he is dealing with the flu. So we have let our guard down, America. The flu is still a real thing, and so while you're there getting your boosters and everything else, go ahead and get your flu shot as well. Just let them just put an IV in you, and anything that comes new, just, put it in your body. You'll be fine. Just trust the Lord. We want to welcome Josh Kimbrell to studio. I have muted his mic until I knew that he was ready.
Appreciate you for having me.
Folks, we're starting something new today on this episode of the Pentecast podcast. Josh has decided to join the payroll and get on board with what we're doing here because we're changing lives, as you can tell. And we decided to spice things up for all of you church dwellers. We want to start a sports segment, and Josh has agreed to be the sports analyst. So without further ado, Josh, what's the news today?
Pakistan beats the West Indies by 9 runs in second T2-01 to take unassailable 2-0 lead.
So is this cricket?
This is something.
Okay, it's a 2-0 lead, cricket. Pakistan beats the West Indies by 9. Congratulations, Pakistan. What else?
They beat them really bad, and it's honestly embarrassing, and I can't believe that they would even, post about this. I mean, this is ridiculous.
No. What about the update for water polo?
Water polo, I'll pull it up right here. I used to play water polo back in my day.
Was that before the accident?
Yeah, it was before the accident.
Mm-hmm.
Quarterfinals determined in Women's EuroLeague. Mataro will miss out. That's a big hurt. It's a big hurt. They really need Mataro.
Get well soon, Mataro. We're praying for you. Water polo is a dangerous sport, and you just got to watch out, because there's other people in that water. And if you're not watching out, chances are you could collide.
Yeah, or drown.
Yeah. So get well soon, Mataro. How did you think that went?
I mean, I really feel like we could have got something more interesting than water polo and cricket, but
hey, we're not going to talk about football. Oh, actually, we are, folks. Welcome, Brother Will Gardner, to the Pentecast podcast.
Thank y'all for having me.
So you have been around sports your whole life. I was watching a video of you today before we met. This is really the first time you and I have ever sat down and had a conversation. In one of your highlight videos in high school, they accidentally put, instead of Coffee County, they put Coffee Country.
That about sums it up.
Yeah. And so you were the lead football. How do you say it?
What you mean?
The head lead football quarterback?
Quarterback.
The starting quarterback.
The starting quarterback for Coffee County?
I was.
For how many years?
My sophomore, junior, and then would have been senior year. I got hurt the first game of the year.
Really? So you didn't even play your senior year?
Didn't play it. Probably one half of the first quarter.
Really?
Of my senior year, I believe.
Okay. Well, I know you did confess that you do listen to the podcast. What do you think about the new sports segment that we have included since you've been here?
I think it's interesting. I don't really know what you're talking about when it comes to cricket.
Me neither.
Water polo.
Yeah. Well, we just, we took a poll and we wanted to know the most interesting sports, and that's what the fans want. And so, we're who's that chick that got hurt?
Mataro,
we're praying for you. And so we thought, as a kind gesture for you, trying to, other than a coffee mug, which Kevin Vickers didn't get last week, we thought, how can we make this a special moment for Will? And so we added that segment just for you, because your story really revolves around football, but that's not where the last play happens in your life. And
right.
So we have had several people reach out and say, hey, you need to get Will Gardner on there and on the podcast to tell his story. And so you were so gracious to come into the wilderness where we live and give your story. So where does it all start?
Honestly, from the time I could hold a ball, I guess, throw a ball, it's kind of been, I guess you could say, my identity. grew up in a great home, loving parents, everything I could ever ask for, and found a love from sports at a young age. And it just so happened that not going to say I was great at it, but I did have a little ability to play. And so just started from there, and then made it to high school, had some opportunities, and actually played football and baseball in high school until it got to the point where I had to kind of choose between one. And so I remember kind of sitting down, because, see, my dad, I'm kind of the first one from our family that played football. Everybody else was basketball and baseball. And so everybody thinks I played basketball. They're like, oh, you're super tall, you had to play basketball. And I'm like, I'd actually be short considered, a lot of them. Yeah. And so, but I remember sitting down with my dad, and he actually played maybe a year at Valdosta State before he had some trouble with his shoulder. And he sat down with me and he said, football is going to pay for school. With baseball, they don't give a full scholarship. And so that just kind of was the defining moment for me, and just kind of where I was at in life. And so decided to just put everything I had into football, and ended up, like I said, starting my majority of my sophomore year in high school, started my junior year, and then coming into my senior year, had some opportunities with some schools and stuff, and to play in college, and was really just ready to get that over with, that whole recruiting process, because I'm the type.
Is it stressful?
It is. I'm the type. I'm not one of these people that's just I'm not going to pick up the phone and keep in contact regularly, but like when we talk, it's like, we never skipped a beat.
Yeah.
And so it was one of those things where my dad was always on me. And see, my dad was a big part of this process. Mm-hmm. And so he was the one that really got it was a DVD, but we'll call it game film of me in high school, and sent it out to like probably 30 or 40 colleges.
Wow.
And so he was a big part of that. And so he was on me about, have you called such and such back? Have you talked to such and such today? And I'm like, no, I don't want to. Like,
I'm
just having fun.
And so I was kind of ready to get that behind me.
Yeah.
And so had the opportunity, like I said, going into my senior year, I was ready just to kind of enjoy it and get it, get the recruiting behind me. So me and my dad took a trip to Louisville, Kentucky. And when I got up there, I just fell in love with the coaching staff. Just really kind of fell in love with everybody there, because it was just the way they made you feel. I mean, it was like I was coming back home, really.
Yeah.
And so after some, thoughts and discussion, decided to commit to the University of Louisville. And then I get into my senior year. First game of my senior year, we're playing Brunswick at home, and ended up tearing my ACL. And it was just, devastating. Mm-hmm. But during this time, so I grew up in church. My mom was it was kind of opposite for us. So my mom grew up differently than my dad did, I'll say. So my dad grew up in church. So, I mean, that's all, and then when he got to a certain age, he got out of church. And so my mom was like, I don't want my kids to grow up. And so she made sure we were always at church.
Okay, so his influence early in life really influenced her later in life.
Correct. And
that's awesome.
My grandparents, which is my dad's mom and dad, influenced my mom. And so it had a real big impact on her. So she made sure we were always at church, and very faithful. We didn't miss. And so I'll never forget this. We were first game of my senior year. Wasn't long before that, my dad had gotten saved.
Wow.
So this, it just kind of did a whole turnaround. And I'll never forget him walking up the stairs to my room, and I could tell something was bothering him, because he's not, he doesn't show a lot of emotions. And so this was a big ordeal for him, because they'd been in revival this week. Mm-hmm. And I don't even remember who they were in revival with, but first game of my senior year is Friday night. Well, revival went through Friday night. And he come up there to tell me that he wasn't going to be able to make it because he felt like he had to be at revival.
Wow.
And that's huge.
Man, that's awesome.
Like my dad hadn't missed, and so he was one of those people, he was never a bad guy. Never really saw him do anything wrong, but he wasn't saved, And so that was like, when he got saved, it was like a complete 180, because he probably never missed an event in my life as far as a sporting event. And so that was huge, but I was completely understanding because because of my background and knew, the change that it made my dad.
Knew the importance.
Right. And so I'll never forget that. And just the way things played out, I think they'd gotten out of church, and then they'd gotten the phone call that I'd gotten hurt. And so they're trying to rush over there and all. And it was just, that was probably for me one of the hardest things I ever had to go through.
Your injury in
My
high
injury,
school?
correct. Because, for me, it was almost like a bad breakup, a bad death in the family, because I've poured everything
You think your life's over?
Had into this. And so, all I can think about is Louisville's going to back out on me. They're going to pull their scholarship from me and all this stuff. And so it was definitely nerve-wracking, but also I've put all this time and effort into my senior year.
And it could just go away.
And now I'm not going to get to enjoy it. And so there was a lot of, just questions. God, why? And, and I always felt like I was a person that put forth the effort, tried to remain humble, because my dad always preached that with me and my little brother. And so it was always like, why? I always looked for that one answer. Yeah. But through it all, God gave me, hundreds of answers and took me through adversity. And I believe, as bad as I hated it at the time, it made me who I am today.
Really?
It took me through, not just walking through one bad day, but we're talking about 9 to 10 months to a year of therapy and rehab, and having to, put all that into it.
I got you. I got a question about that. I know this is kind of a little off topic, but how does it hurt really bad to tear your ACL?
Well, and this is what I was going to get to. I hadn't got all the way in. So actually I've had 3 ACL surgeries. So
did any of them hurt?
I'm asking. I've never torn my ACL.
If it didn't hurt, why would he quit playing football?
Because your knee's unstable.
Which would hurt.
You don't know that.
It's both painful and unstable.
Okay.
So actually the very first time I did it, when I was in high school, I tore my ACL, tore my lateral and medial meniscus, and then tore my MCL off the bone.
Good Lord.
And so the first time was like the most traumatic time.
Yeah.
And probably the worst hurting.
Yeah, and that was the biggest thing, is so like especially with like the ACL is the most major probably, but the meniscus was the one that, you can't have any weight on it. It has to be non-weight bearing. So you're on crutches.
So where's your meniscus?
It's
your knee.
It's the
Shut your mouth.
If I'm not mistaken, it's the cartilage that's.
I believe so, because my mom tore hers. It's like on the outside of the knee. If I'm
well, you have an inner and or a medial and lateral.
Okay.
So you had it all messed up.
Yeah.
You remember the play?
Oh yeah, for sure. We were.
How'd it go down?
If I'm not mistaken, we were 4th down, and it was short yardage, and we just got in a power form, and handed the ball off to the running back, and he fumbled, and so that's just guy from Brunswick picks it up, and it's me and him, and I always pride myself with this, but I did make the tackle. I didn't let him score, but when he went to
I was looking at your stats, and I wanted to ask this. This is college. The stats on ESPN say you had 3 interceptions, but then I think it said you had 2 tackles. So
in college?
No, yeah.
See, this was in high school, so I don't know. I have to think back to college.
So if you're a quarterback and you had 2 tackles, were those both picks?
Well, they would have had to been. I'd had to tackle the person that picked it off.
Just lay him out.
Like,
but
you might have been doing that for fun.
But yeah, so just trying to tackle a guy off of a fumble was the first time.
And then it just messed you up.
Yeah, because and that was the biggest thing, is it was a non-contact. So then it's goes to questioning your knee and different things like that, and so I'm 8 to 9 months into my rehabilitation, and I'm in the gym one day. I'm about to graduate, and we're just kind of cutting or playing around right before the bell rings, and we're shooting basketball. And I go up to try to dunk, and when I come down, I landed on that knee. And I felt, something kind of didn't feel right. And, man, immediately I just walked straight out of the gym. And, it was just like somebody just knocked the breath out of me. And So I go home and just try to play it off, trying to act cool. Well, then the next morning, we were at my grandparents for something, and I could tell my dad kept on like, what's going on? Something.
Were you kind of given
that, and he could just tell I wasn't my normal self, and personality, something was bothering me. And so I'll be honest, I broke down in tears and just,
really?
I started telling him because I knew, just because you'd have to know my dad, he was constantly on me about, son, be careful. Don't, this.
Don't ruin,
right.
Don't get injured.
So at this point, you just assumed you had tore it, or you knew you had tore it?
Well, okay, so this time I didn't. At this point, I didn't know.
Okay.
So we called Dr. Barber, James Barber, who's the orthopedic surgeon in Douglas, and he meets us up at his office on a Saturday morning. And so we get in there, and he's doing his testing all, and he said, I think you just may have tore some scar tissue. He says, because a lot of times when you tear scar tissue, it feels like you tore your ACL again. And so I was like relieved, like hallelujah, And so I graduated in May, like say the 20th. Well, then I had to be in Louisville like around early June. So, there's only a couple of days there, and then I'm in Louisville, Kentucky. And so I get up there, we start practice, we start working out different things, but I could tell something wasn't right. It was like my knee wasn't getting any stronger. It was like it was weaker.
Couldn't move it.
Well,
I couldn't.
I could participate. It was like I could participate in all the workouts, but it was like it just something didn't feel right.
Something was wrong, right?
So they're like, well, the best thing we can do, let's just go get an MRI. Well, that's when I found out I'd torn it again, and so now I'm 10 hours from home. Just got to a new place. Just found out my ACL's torn again. And so, that was tough, especially, because I grew up, I guess there's no better way to call it other than spoiled. Your mom washed your clothes, cooked supper. So now I'm in a new place. I'm having to learn, washing my clothes, take care of myself. On top of that, I just had, major knee surgery. And so it was tough. But through all that, like I said, that's kind of what built me and made me who I believe I am today, just through that adversity. Mm-hmm. When I first got to Louisville, and I don't know how many people, follow sports or anything, but
we don't.
Teddy Bridgewater was there. So Teddy Bridgewater was
didn't he? No, I'm thinking of a Culpepper guy. Teddy Bridgewater was the Viking, right?
Right.
So quarterback.
He got drafted in the first round, played with the Minnesota Vikings, had some injuries and different things, so he's been bounced around, but now he's a starting quarterback for the Denver Broncos.
Yeah. He's doing better?
Right.
Yeah. Okay, I thought he did good in Minnesota.
Well, he got injured, and he had a pretty bad dislocation, so I guess the positive that come out of mine was I didn't have any artery damages or anything like that. It was all ligaments. See, I think he just kind of blew his knee out, so to speak. It was pretty bad. But now he's doing really well. I think he's had a pretty good year at Denver. So Teddy was there my first 2 years, and so the coaching staff that I got recruited by was Coach Charlie Strong, and the offensive coordinator was Sean Watson, and just fell in love with those guys. And
you have any communication with those guys?
I not here recently. Not long after I'd gotten saved, got in church, and started working, his son called me one day, and I'll kind of get to that where I was working at, and wanted to know if I wanted to come up to Pittsburgh and take an opportunity as a graduate assistant under his dad and coach. Mm-hmm. But I turned it down. But been there 2 years, back full go, healthy, participating 100%, and felt like, that the year after Teddy left was going to be my year to play. Well, then we find out Coach Strong's leaving. So he resigned and took the head coaching job at the University of Texas. Completely understandable. It's the University of Texas.
Yeah.
And so I'll never forget our athletic director come down there, and he told me, he said, I promise you I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to get somebody in here good. And he ended up hiring Bobby Petrino. So Bobby Petrino kind of had a past at the Falcons in Arkansas and different places.
Okay. I'm thinking of that sounds awfully familiar with the Louisville basketball coach, Bobby Petrino.
Patino.
That's
oh my goodness, I've gone blank.
Am I wrong?
No, you're right. They're neck and neck, but his first name's not Bobby, and I've gone blank here for a second.
Yeah. Well, anyways, it's irrelevant. That's who I thought of.
But they're similar. You are correct. And I'll think of it here in a second. I can't believe I forgot it. Rick Pitino. Yeah. So Bobby Petrino come in, new coaching staff, everything, and like I say, I'm back full go, full healthy and all, and we open up, and this backtracking here, this is the first year. So we were in the Big East, which was not a Power 5 conference, and still, which they've done away with the Big East. And then we transferred to the American Athletic Conference, which wasn't a Power 5 conference. And then the first year, so we're going into the ACC, which is a big deal. It's a Power 5, better schools.
Yeah, more recognition.
Right. So that was a big deal. So we opened up, ended up winning the starting job. We opened up with Miami at home on Labor Day weekend. So it was on a Monday night. We played Miami at home, played a bunch of different schools. And so fast forward and I don't remember what game it was, but we were at FIU, which is Florida International.
And you're the starting quarterback for Louisville.
Starting quarterback for Louisville at the time. And
it's an honor, man.
Thank you. It was
Probably surreal.
yeah, I guess at the time I'm so ignorant and just you don't see it. You just get so it's football. And that was the one thing I tried to keep it, that it's no different than high school. It comes with a lot more responsibility and media and things like that. And that was the one thing I never understood because my dad was so hard on me, but to a good extent. I don't say it in a bad way, but he would always be like, son, you don't realize who you hang around. You don't have to be doing wrong, but all it takes is being around that bad person or that bad situation, and boom, and so that really, my dad really helped me with that. And so I always tried to be careful, with what I did, and not that I was perfect by any means. I wasn't far from it. And so we're in, and I wish I would have looked, but it may have been the 4th or 5th game that year when we played FIU, and just a little screen pass, nothing major. Throw a little screen pass, and next thing I knew, a guy dives in head first and hits me in my knee, and immediately I knew that I'd done something to it, and so stop the game. I go out and go and have another MRI and go through the same process again. And the doctor said the best way that I could describe it is like if you were to take a piece of rope and you were to take a knife and cut around that rope and it just frays and there's still the rope's still connected, but there's a lot of it missing. And so he said that's what my ACL looked like.
Because you had just done a number on it so many times.
So he said, I can repair it, but it's still doing its job.
Yeah.
He said, so we could, he said, what I want to do is go in and clean it out and try to see if it'd grow back together, and then we don't have to do, the whole reconstruction again. So I went and had a little procedure. He went in there, cleaned some stuff out, did a little, and so I missed 2 weeks and come back. Actually, the game you saw against Clemson, that was actually the first game I come back after that procedure.
Well done, sir.
So we were down.
You're throwing bombs.
Thank you. So we were down late in the second or in the third quarter. So it was like 9 minutes to go in the third quarter, and that was the first game I come back in. And come back that game, we actually lose to Clemson, pretty close game, and we're we're inside the 5, and we should have scored and should have won. And then we play NC State, Florida State, play several schools, and then we go to Boston College. And
which was supposed to be an easy game.
Right. And so it's cold. We're in Boston, and just a small little, curl route, nothing major. I just step and go to throw. When I plan on it, I feel something pop. And so now what he said was connected, I finished it off. And so I never forget, I remember sitting down after all that, and, I've had 3 knee surgeries. So me and the training staff, we're like brothers. I've seen them every day. I'm with them, got a really close relationship with them. And I'll never forget, and this has like been drilled into my mind, sitting down with the head trainer, and I looked at him. I'm like, so what are we looking at here? Like, what's the time frame? When can I get back? And he's like, hold on, you need to slow your horses. He said, after 3, he said that we're worried about, are you going to even be able to walk straight or walk normal again? And I'm like, nah, that's not even a question. And so, just go through the surgery and all, and just some things happened, after the surgery that didn't, I guess go in my favor, and the Lord knew what He was doing through it all, and just felt like I was shorthanded on some things with the coaching. We had a new coaching staff, and really with 3 ACLs, you're basically you're damaged goods, mm-hmm. And so that's all it was, and nothing.
And it's a business.
It's a business, I felt like I had the ability and the talent, and I felt like I showed it to be out there. But you're damaged goods,
You're
so
a risk,
right? So you take a guy, you invest your program around him, you build your program around him, and
he keeps getting
hurt. So and that's where I was.
Unfortunately, who was your second string?
Lamar Jackson. So,
I was just about
anybody
to
know him?
Right. So it was, and it's funny because Lamar was young, and so I that's what's been so cool is I've got to see Lamar. I hadn't talked to him in a long, but see him kind of grow up.
So you still had communication with him for a while?
For a little while. And
was he a pretty cool guy?
He was. See, and that's the thing. My last year at Louisville, Lamar's a freshman. So he's straight out of high school, young, and just a cut up. I mean, he was just just loved to cut up. And that's that was the biggest thing about Lamar. He's always was trying to have fun and laugh. And so,
and for those who don't follow sports, and it's totally fine if that's not your hobby, Lamar Jackson, you want to fill him in, Josh? Who is he?
The starting quarterback for the NFL, the Baltimore Ravens, and he's probably a top.
He's one of the best.
Start something. He's probably easy top 5.
Top 5 quarterbacks in the league right now, and so. This man that we're sitting down with held him at bay.
Yeah.
But that, what, that is a pretty cool, badge of honor, that you had that starting position. And I know there's so much disappointment because you pour so much into it, and obviously, people can look at me and see how athletic I am. But when you devote so much to it, your plans are foiled, you think.
Right.
But yet Jonah, the foiled plans are really your destiny.
That's right. Yeah.
Did you know Phil Robertson?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Terry Bradshaw was his second stringer.
Yeah.
And so I'll even go out on a limb and say Lamar's probably one of the top 5 players in the NFL right now.
Yeah.
He was an MVP
candidate.
He won it, and
he did win MVP?
Like his second or third year, wasn't it?
Yeah, 2 or 3 years ago, he was the MVP.
Wow.
So that's the best player in NFL. So
Yeah.
He's done a lot of great things. And
he won the Heisman at Louisville.
Yeah. And they
first Heisman winner.
They retired his number not too long ago.
Yes.
What?
They retired his number.
So nobody will ever wear the number 8 again at the University of Louisville.
Really?
So that's a big badge of honor there.
What number did you wear?
I was a number 11.
For some reason, I feel like I knew that. But anyways.
So I was number 11 when I was at Louisville. And so fast forward to that, and that's where I was, and without, I'm not on here to knock anybody. I hope people realize
Let's
that.
do it, dude.
But there was some situations that unfolded there that I felt, like I said, I got shorthanded, and I'd call my dad and kind of vent to him. And so you got to realize my dad's a different person now. He's not the same guy.
Cutthroat, get my son on the field, right?
That's not the same person. And so I'll tell you a little bit about that in a second. But just like when we go to camp, we scrimmage and we put our numbers on the table when we get back in the quarterback room, and I had the best numbers. but it was like I kept getting less reps. I'm damaged goods. And so I stuck it out that year, tried to, at my best, do everything they asked me to do, but I knew I was going to transfer. Mm-hmm. And through all this process, my dad's praying, Lord, open one door and let it be his will. Mm-hmm. And so I'm thinking, man, I'm going to get to transfer to, another big university, play, have a good year, maybe have a chance at the NFL, all this stuff. Didn't know what the Lord was doing. Mm-hmm. And so through all this, a guy named Will Hall reaches out to me. He's the head coach at the University of West Georgia. So a little Division II school in Carrollton, Georgia. And little did I know what the Lord's plan was. So at the time, I grew up going to the First Assembly of God. So John and Bridget Williams were the youth pastors at the assembly at the time. So I wasn't, in essence, part of their youth group because I was back at Louisville. But we become close, and so they had lived in Carrollton before, and went to church in Villa Rica at Brother Roger Luke's church.
Okay.
So
very nice guy. I met him a few months ago.
Very nice guy, and so I'm It all works out to where I transfer to the University of Georgia, and I get there.
West Georgia.
University of West Georgia. I'm sorry, not the University of Georgia. University of West Georgia. And, I'm there just, and I mean, in all honesty, just enjoying college life. So I got there probably I would probably say the beginning of January, and knew all along through this whole process, I went to church, but I went just to
say you did
the conscience, it would just to kind of, because I
like
knew
you, Josh.
Okay.
I knew that's where I needed to be.
Yeah.
But I knew I wasn't living where I should have been living, because I knew at the end of the day, obviously 2 gods in one house isn't going to work. And football, was a god, and not that football's bad, because it's taught me a lot.
Yeah.
But for me, it was my life.
Yeah.
And so transferred to West Georgia and start going to church instead of going to where I was going. Now I'm going to Villa Rica at Brother Rogers Church. And little did I know God had a plan, and he's working it all out. There's a reason that I went to West Georgia, and it wasn't for football. And so I got there, and I'll never forget this. It was on a Thursday night. I was walking out of a bar, and soon as my feet hit the sidewalk, conviction was all over me.
Man, that's wonderful.
Like there was no running from it. I wasn't in a church pew. I mean, it was just all over.
Real.
And so I was close to home. I mean, I'm only, 3 or 4 hours from home, whereas I was 10 hours. So I'm going home, every chance I get on the weekends now. And so I went home that weekend, and for whatever reason, Brother Marshall's the pastor at First Assembly, but he was out of town, and Brother John was preaching. And he was preaching out of Genesis about Adam, and if I'm not mistaken, the title of his service or of his sermon was "Adam, Where Are You?" Talking about how you used to walk with the Lord in the cool of the day, but where are you at? And man, it was like I was shaking. It was just good conviction.
Yeah, man.
And made the trip to the altar that morning, and man, it was like, my life changed after that. That Sunday afternoon when I got to my mom and dad's house, I'll never forget my dad looking at me and said, how do you feel? And he looked at me. He said, I prayed you'd be miserable.
Wow.
And he said, I prayed that God would open one door. And that's what he did with West Georgia. You can't change my mind that the only reason I went to the University of West Georgia was to get saved, because the Lord knew. But then after that, football wasn't the same. Mm-hmm. I didn't have the love for it like I used to. And it was like I thought that I knew that the reason I guess I didn't get saved earlier is because I knew I was going to have to give it up, and I didn't want to. But little did I know giving it up was going to be so easy, because the Lord, just changed everything. Changed
everything in his timing, right?
Correct. And so I tell people, I'm hard-headed, so it took 3 times, 3 knee surgeries, all this stuff to get my attention. But, man, he got it. And couldn't thank him enough.
Amen. Amen. So where does this little lady you call wife, how does she get in the picture?
So, going again to John and Bridget, they were the youth pastors at the assembly, and they would take the youth to Fort Lake youth camp in Mississippi. And her dad would go and preach it. I think he preached it maybe 1 year. So I don't want to say he preached it a lot. I think it was 1 year he preached it. And they got a connection, with them through there. And I just happened to see my wife one day on Bridget's Facebook. And I'm like, man, you start, and I'll never forget it. It was kind of funny. And I'll be honest with you, I'm one of those guys that reached out through Facebook. But I was sitting.
Oh, me and my wife, I tell her it was love at first text.
But I'm sitting. It was funny because I'm like trying to think of what could I do? And there was two girls going to Villa Rica at the time that I'd become close friends with. And we were sitting at Waffle House one night after church. And they both looked at me and like, are you dumb? Like, you act like you're just going to run into her like at the mall or something or at Walmart. Like, you've got to, because I didn't want to be that guy. Nothing wrong with being that guy.
A lot of football plays, but you were running short on the playbook on how to win a good girl.
Right. I was always the type I wanted to talk to you in person. So I just shot my shot, and come to find out, we got to talking, and man, it's a crazy story. So my wife at the time, grew up in church. So that's all she's ever known. Pastor's kid. They evangelize. So, that's all she's ever known is church. And she was the type, she didn't want to get married. She was Miss Independent. Mm-hmm. Well, her mom's complete opposite. I'll never forget her telling me the story of this and putting two and two together. She said, her mom told her, she was like, I'm never going to marry anybody. There's not anybody in the holiness movement that I'm even interested in, and blah, blah, blah. And her mom looked at her and said, if the Lord has to save somebody, he'll do it. And that was the time.
Man,
right
her
around
mom
the time,
wanted her out of her house.
That was honestly, we looked at it. That was around the same time I got saved.
That's incredible, man.
And so, it was just the Lord in it. And so we started talking and all, and I think it was around Thanksgiving break with college, because I backtrack. So I got saved. I didn't immediately quit football because I'd committed that year to them, right. And to me that's a big
obligation,
deal.
Yeah,
right.
Sure.
So I finished out that year, which was tough because now I'm in an environment where before I was going out with them, hanging out with them, and that was a big deal to get back to school and and look at them and say, I can't do that. I got saved.
Yeah.
They're like, what are you talking about? We're saved. That's a big deal. Then, But through all of that, and it was hard. I'll be the first one to tell you, peer pressure is real.
Yeah, it is.
But the Lord, helped me through all that. He really did it. But I was on fire too. It was like,
That's
nothing
awesome.
could put it, And so when I got the first break, drove out to Louisiana. All we've done is text, talk on the phone. Didn't know her family. I show up one night. We go to church.
How much did you get in that service? Were you like running all over the place?
No, not at all.
Usually when people are trying to court, they get super spiritual.
No, see, I was reverse. I was real reserved.
Yeah.
So I may have sat there and I probably didn't even say a word. They're like, who is, And so it is just a crazy story. I look back and think about it now and I'm like, man, you lost your mind. Like you had no marbles at the time. Like it was just
so out of character.
Right. And so go out there and meet her and it was like instantly like, and I'll never forget my mom and dad were going to the mountains with the church, with the youth to help them out. And my mom really wanted me to go because, see, I've been away for 4 years, just moved back home. So this is the end of December. And I'm like, no, I think I'm going to go to Louisiana. Well, this time I packed a bunch of stuff because I really didn't know if I was coming back.
Really?
So I move out of the spur of the moment, move out to Louisiana. my in-laws, like, I don't even, like, they were very welcoming. And, and I look back now.
They're probably not anymore now that you're here.
True. Mm-hmm. But I look back now and I'm thinking, man, that they had to think this dude is crazy. So I live in the church parsonage, it's in the church. There's a little evangelist quarters in the church. So I live in there for a little while, or really a while. And so I'm needing a job. So I start working at a funeral home because my father-in-law's, the local preacher. And so he's like, they're always looking to hire. So I started working with them. And that's when I was working at the funeral home and all, when the guy called me about that job opportunity.
Oh, man.
But I knew.
The devil knows, right?
Exactly.
Like, oh, my goodness.
And, man, and I'll be honest with you, at the time, it's like, man, that's can you do it? That was my thought is, can you live for the Lord and
coach?
But it was
knowing the environment.
Knowing I couldn't, but the question come up in my head. And I'll never forget, because I come from, like, my grandparents. My granny told me, she's like, I always, as great as we wanted to see you doing football, she said, but they play on Sundays, and that that's a big, and it just the Lord worked it all out the whole time from the very beginning. I'm ignorant to it, didn't know He was there working it out, but He was planning every step, and so. Move out to Louisiana, get a job at a funeral home. And, it was just a blessing being out there, because I worked at a funeral home for about a year, realized, I want to do something different, want somewhere I can grow. Me and my wife just got married and ended up getting connected with a State Farm agent while I'm out there, and then joined his staff there and become an agent aspirant. Mm-hmm. And so I always... After that, I kind of thought, man, I'd love to get back to Douglas. That would be a great place to have an agency, because, I know a lot of people. And so didn't get back to Douglas, but we're close to Douglas. And so that's been a blessing. And, man, it's just the Lord had His hand in, from the beginning.
One thing that sticks out to my mind, okay, and I've been wanting to say this, but the viewers know how bad I am at cutting people off, and they're praying for me. But one thing that just sticks out to my mind with your story, number one, there's so many similarities with my story and yours. We're both strangely athletic. Number two, you sporadically moved to Louisiana. I had $900 in my pocket when I come out here to court my wife.
Right.
And, talking about what I call my move to Georgia was the dumbest, best decision I ever made.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And you probably look at Louisiana the same way.
You probably had more money than I did. I wish I remembered.
Where did you live?
I was in Oklahoma.
No, I'm saying, where did you live when you came here?
In a van down by the river. But one thing that just stuck out to me was how from high school, your dad pursued your career harder than you. Like, it would irritate you about how adamant he was, how you got to call these people back or whatever. But full circle, at the end of your college career, your dad's praying, Lord, bring him back.
Right.
Because at some point, he must have had to feel some type of responsibility, like, now my son's over there playing college ball. I'm saved now, and I want him to grow up in church. I want him to take the priority that I did. So I think in full circle, it's like your dad's praying one way, and then all of a sudden that prayer just turns right around,
That's kind of what, because like I said, he looked at me that day and he said, I just prayed that the Lord would, make you miserable. And it got to that. The thing I loved the most, I guess you could say it kind of let me down, injuries and different things, and it just wasn't the same.
Yeah.
That's what's so crazy is, like I said, my mom is the reason I have a knowledge of church. Because, and it wasn't that my dad was a bad person. He just didn't go with us. Yeah. And so my mom was, we were religiously at church Wednesday and Sundays. We didn't miss. And
chances if you did not have that raising, you may have never came back from Louisville.
Correct. And so that's why they both played such a vital part of my life, is my mom from the beginning and then my dad there towards the end, So, it was a big deal.
Yeah, if your mom never, from the beginning, your dad may never, Came back.
Right. And see, through all this, she's praying for my dad because she, and I'll never forget this, and I wish I had it, but they had like a silent testimony service. And I'd never heard of that, but they put
we have several of those. Anybody have a testimony? We have several of those.
But they wrote it on like a poster board. And so it was pretty touching. And when she
they put it up?
Right.
Oh, that's
and
awesome.
So I guess they walk across the platform and they stand there and then walk. And hers was, I prayed for my husband for 19 years.
Man.
And him sitting out there in the pew. I mean, so
that's powerful, man.
It was just, so it wasn't just, she was the rock for us in church, when we were, because she said, I want to raise my kids different. I want them to be in church. And so that was a big ordeal.
That's amazing, man. That is an outstanding testimony. And I will say this on just for the record, I have thoroughly enjoyed sitting down and talking with you. I think you're a fine young man who's only 2 years younger than me, if you would believe that. My weight and my balding makes people think I'm older.
Hey, my little brother's 22 and he's bald.
Well, believe it or not, I have an amazing story about how I was recruited. We don't have time. We don't have time. The Huddle House. Yeah. Man, thank you so much for coming. We hope you just share your testimony. This is going to be going for the entire world to hear your testimony. So we, more importantly, pray that it touches lives and persuades people that living for God is the best decision and the best play that you can make. Thank you for joining us on this episode. We love you. Over and under.